The old man's house smelled of dust and silence. Sunlight seeped through the grimy windows, lazily illuminating the worn-out furniture. I stood in the center of the room, feeling the hollow emptiness pressing against my chest. After his death, it became especially quiet here. No one dropped by anymore, no one brought bread or milk. I was the only one left to sort through his things. There was no one else to do it anyway. I tried to move quickly, not to linger on small things. Old newspapers, faded photographs, stacks of books with yellowed pages, all of it stirred a strange mix of melancholy and reluctance to dig into someone else's life. I had known the old man for many years. After his son disappeared a couple of years ago, I became the only one who visited him and helped around the house. The old man rarely spoke of his son, but when he did, his voice would become quiet and shaky. I turned over another box and stumbled upon a diary. A worn cover, pages with slightly yellowed edges. The letters on the spine had faded, but I immediately knew it was a personal journal. Something clenched inside me. I hesitated, should I open it or not? It felt wrong. The old man's secrets should have gone with him. But I couldn't just throw it away either. There was something about that diary that seemed to draw me in. I placed it on the nightstand next to the bed. Let it lie there. Maybe later I would decide what to do with it. But as I left the room, I found myself looking back. The diary seemed like a dark spot in the empty house, as if it held a secret the old man hadn't managed to share. I closed the door and tried to push the diary out of my mind. But the feeling of unease, as if I had left something important behind, didn't let go. Why did I even decide to keep it? Maybe out of respect. Or maybe out of fear that inside lay a truth I wasn't ready to accept. The wind picked up outside, making the windows creak. I stepped onto the porch and looked at the deserted street. The sun was setting, and the shadows of the trees stretched across the old path leading to the house. Enough, I muttered to myself. It's just a diary. A week had passed. The diary still lay on the nightstand in our bedroom, as if reminding me of its presence every time I passed by. I kept telling myself it was none of my business. The old man's personal notes. But something kept drawing me to it. A few times I picked it up, flipped the worn cover, but never opened it. This evening I found myself near the nightstand again. My wife was downstairs cooking dinner, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted up the stairs. I looked at the diary, thoughts spinning in my head. Just throw it away, I whispered to myself. Why do you need to know someone else's secrets? But instead, I put it back in its place and sat on the bed. My hands were slightly trembling. Maybe I was just tired. The past few days had been tough: funerals, cleaning, the emptiness in the old man's house. I had known him for many years. After his son disappeared a few years ago, he had grown frail, as if life had left along with him. But the old man never fully gave up. I would visit him every week, help with groceries, and chat. He didn't like talking about his son, just occasionally reproached himself for something but never explained. I thought he was just mourning. I looked at the diary again. It was as if it was calling me. I abruptly stood up to leave the room, but stopped at the doorway. What if there was something important inside? Maybe he had written something about his son? Maybe he knew where he had gone? My logic fought with my feelings. I tried to convince myself it wasn't my problem, but something kept pulling me back. You promised yourself not to meddle, I whispered. But the more I tried to forget about the diary, the more I felt its presence. It seemed to absorb my thoughts, filling the entire room. At dinner, my wife noticed my distraction. Everything okay? She asked, placing a plate of pasta in front of me. Yeah, just tired, I replied. She looked at me closely but said nothing. I knew she sensed my tension, but I didn't want to involve her in these strange thoughts. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay staring at the ceiling while the diary seemed to breathe next to me, pushing away any peace. Why hadn't the old man thrown it away earlier? Why had he kept those notes? I told myself that the next morning I would take the diary to the attic and cover it with a box of books. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't be able to forget about it. The morning started with a heavy feeling in my chest. My wife had already left for work, and I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The diary was still on the nightstand, drawing my gaze like a black hole. I got up, walked past it, and decided to do something useful. I did the laundry, tidied up the living room, but my thoughts kept circling back to the diary. Why was it bothering me so much? Why couldn't I just forget about it? I made myself some coffee, sat by the window, and tried to distract myself by looking at the yard. But as soon as I let my guard down for a second, the thought crept in again. What if the old man wrote something important? Something no one else knew? An hour later, I gave in. I returned to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and took the diary in my hands. The cover was worn, with a faint smell of old paper. I opened it at random, somewhere in the middle. I heard footsteps again last night. My son has returned. Or is it just my imagination? I can't sleep. They're laughing upstairs. That girl again. I shut the diary as if it had burned me. My heart pounded faster. The son returned? But how? He had been missing for a couple of years. No one knew where he was. Even the police couldn't find any traces. Trying to calm myself, I took a deep breath. Maybe the old man just lost his mind in his old age? Invented company for himself to avoid feeling lonely. But I couldn't shake the thought that he had heard footsteps. I opened the diary again on another page. Today, I saw her face through the curtain. She came to him at night when I was almost asleep. They whispered in the kitchen, too quietly for me to make out the words. Who is she? Why are they hiding? Why doesn't my son talk to me anymore? My hands went cold. I nervously licked my lips. The old man was convinced that his son was coming home at night. But that simply couldn't be. I started going through possible explanations in my head. Hallucinations, loneliness, senile insanity. I closed the diary and tossed it on the bed. I didn't want to believe it. I just couldn't. Everything seemed absurd and ridiculous. But a part of me felt growing anxiety. What if the old man was right after all? I stood up and paced the room. My head buzzed with thoughts. Maybe I shouldn't have opened the diary at all? The old man had always been a bit strange after his son disappeared. Sometimes he would start a conversation with an empty space as if his son was standing beside him. I thought it was just the pain of loss. The sound of the door opening interrupted my thoughts. My wife had come home early. I looked into the hallway, trying to hide my unease. Are you home? She asked, taking off her coat. Yeah, decided to work from home today, I replied, avoiding eye contact. Are you okay? You look tense. Everything's fine, just a bit tired. I lied. She nodded, but I saw in her eyes that she didn't believe me. I wanted to tell her the truth, about the diary, the strange notes, but something held me back. Maybe the fear of seeming foolish, or perhaps the inner feeling that I wasn't ready to share this burden yet. When she went to the kitchen, I returned to the bedroom and picked up the diary again. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Maybe if I read a few more pages, everything would make sense. I would find some explanation, but for now, it felt like with every line I was sinking deeper into someone else's secret, which was slowly turning into my own. The next day, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I knew the night had been restless. The diary was still lying on the bed beside me, like a reminder of the strange thoughts that wouldn't let go. My wife had already left for work, and the house was quiet. I got up, made the bed, but the diary ended up in my hands again. I opened it randomly and landed on the line. Yesterday, I heard her voice. She spoke softly, but I recognized her. It can't be. This is my friend's wife. Why is she with my son? Why do they come at night? My son avoids me, but I know it's her. My fingers turned white from gripping the pages too hard. A ringing filled my ears as if the world around me had become unreal. I slammed the diary shut and threw it on the bed. Rubbish, I whispered, clutching my head. Those words stuck in my mind. The old man clearly went insane in his old age. My wife, he must have been confusing people, as he did in the last months before his death. But why her? Why so confidently? A chill ran down my spine. Trying to distract myself, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. A pale face with dark circles under the eyes stared back at me. It's just a diary, the ramblings of a lonely old man. He didn't know what he was saying. I kept repeating to myself. All day I tried to stay away from the bedroom. I worked on my laptop in the living room, occasionally glancing at the clock. My wife was supposed to come back by evening. I felt cornered, as if entangled in my own thoughts. When she arrived, I forced a smile, trying to act normal. She noticed my tension. You're pale again. Maybe you should see a doctor? She suggested, putting her bag on the chair. Just didn't sleep well, I replied, avoiding her gaze. We ate in silence, and every move she made seemed suspicious to me. I tried to catch her eye, but she avoided looking at me. Or was I just imagining it? After dinner, I went to my study, pretending to finish some work, but my thoughts circled around the diary. How could I even for a second believe that nonsense? My wife and the old man's son. It's absurd. But deep down, a gnawing feeling whispered that things might not be that simple. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay next to her, listening to her steady breathing. One thought pulsed in my head. What if the old man wasn't wrong? Tossing and turning, I got up and headed to the living room. I sat down on the couch, throwing my head back. In the darkness of the room, I could only hear my own heartbeat. I wanted to throw that damn diary away, burn it so it wouldn't haunt me. But I knew, even if I got rid of it, the doubts would remain. I knew that tomorrow I would open the diary again, just to make sure it was all just the old man's delusions. Or to find at least some explanation for what was happening in my head. I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, when my wife left for work, I sat on the bed and picked up the diary again. Cursing myself for being weak, I opened it to that very page. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear my own breathing. Today I saw her again. She was standing by the window on the second floor. She was looking at me, but I pretended not to notice. I acted as if I was cleaning the sidewalk, but I could feel her gaze. Then I saw him. My son came out after her and touched her shoulder. And then I understood everything. I closed the diary, feeling my palms grow sweaty. The old man's son, the very one who disappeared a couple of years ago. Had he really come back? And why was my wife with him? I tried to push these thoughts away, convincing myself that the old man had been rambling. But something in those words struck a chord. Why was the old man so sure? Why did he decide to write that down? I forced myself to overcome the fear and flipped through a few more pages. I asked her directly. She pretended not to understand. Said she hadn't seen my son in a long time, but I saw how she avoided my gaze. She lied. I've known her for many years. She never knew how to hide the truth. But why are they meeting secretly? Why is he hiding? Maybe something happened that I don't know about? I'm afraid to ask directly. My hands were trembling. I slammed the diary shut and tossed it on the bed. Tears welled up, but I gritted my teeth. Couldn't believe it. I trusted her. All these years, and now this. But the old man was sure, and he had even tried to talk to her. I started pacing the room like a trapped animal. Why was I even reading this nonsense? The old man was aging, his mind was getting muddled. He could easily confuse her with someone else. But why her? I remembered how she came home late a few times, saying she was delayed at work or stopped by a friend's place. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, no, I couldn't think like that. She was my wife, my faithful, loving wife. The phone rang, and I flinched. My wife. Hey! Her voice was calm. Everything okay? Yeah, just working. I lied, trying not to let the tension show in my voice. You've been acting strange lately. Are you sure everything's all right? Of course, just busy. She fell silent, and I heard a light sigh on the other end. All right, we'll talk in the evening. Love you. Love you too, I replied automatically. When the call ended, I felt even more drained. If she had really betrayed me, I couldn't accept that thought. But now the seeds of doubt had taken root. I opened the diary again, flipping through the pages at random. They were here again. I can't help but hear their laughter. She's not even trying to hide anymore. Even if I tried to say something, she would deny everything. But I know. I see their shadows in the window. I don't want to live in this lie anymore. Closing the diary, I felt a chill run through my body. I knew I was becoming obsessed with this. My reality was crumbling like a house of cards. I could no longer look at my wife the same way. Her touch felt cold, and her kisses insincere. I wandered through the house in a daze, trying to gather my thoughts. Maybe the old man was just paranoid. Maybe he confused her with someone else. But deep inside, a painful thought lingered. What if he was right? I no longer knew where the truth ended and fiction began. But the diary seemed to have taken over my mind. Couldn't stop. I had to know what was next. I couldn't live in uncertainty. I barely slept. Fragments of the diary spun in my head, and every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard whispers from the next room. My wife slept beside me. Her steady breathing felt distant and detached. In the morning, I got up earlier than her and quietly slipped outside. An idea was already forming in my head. I had to see for myself. Not just take the old man's words for it, but find some proof. I approached the old man's house. Since I had sorted through his belongings, nothing had changed here. The yard was overgrown, and the windows were long covered with dust. I looked at the windows on the second floor, where the old man claimed to have seen her shadow. But the house stood grim and empty. I walked around the house's perimeter. Near the porch, I noticed fresh footprints, as if someone had recently stood there. My heart started beating faster. I crouched to examine them. The prints were vague but definitely new. Maybe some kids had been playing around? Or had I left them myself while cleaning up earlier? Entering the house, I was hit by the heavy smell of dust and mustiness. A deep silence filled the place, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards under my feet. Climbing to the second floor, I checked the son's room. Everything remained as it was, as if he had just stepped out and would return any moment. The bed was neatly made, and on the nightstand, an old photograph, father and son fishing. I stood in the middle of the room, feeling the emptiness wash over me. The old man never got to see his son return, and now he was gone too. Just as I was about to leave, a faint scent caught my attention. Something fresh, light, with a hint of citrus. I approached the bed and cautiously touched the blanket. It was clean, as if it had been recently washed. Goosebumps ran down my spine. I knew I hadn't touched the bed while cleaning. Then why was it so tidy? Why did it smell so clean in a house that had been abandoned for so long? My heart pounded. I quickly left the room, my thoughts swirling. Maybe I was just imagining things? Maybe a neighbor had come in to tidy up? But why only this room? I returned home, trying not to show my anxiety. My wife was already awake and making breakfast. "You're up early," she noted, looking at me in surprise. "Yeah, I had to check something," I mumbled, trying to sound calm. "Are you sure everything's okay? You've been acting strange lately," she said, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. Her touch was warm, but something twisted inside me. I gently pulled away. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," I lied. She gave me a long look but didn't push it. I sat at the table, staring at a plate of scrambled eggs, but I had no appetite. Images from the diary kept resurfacing. After breakfast, I said I was going for a walk and headed back to the neighbor's house. I needed to check something. Maybe the smell was just a coincidence, but I had to be sure. When I arrived, I saw the neighbor from across the road peeking through her window. I decided to approach her, pretending to be curious about the house. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," I waved to her. "Oh, hello. Is everything all right?" she asked, looking a bit concerned. "Yes, I was just sorting through the old man's belongings and noticed that someone might have been in the house. Did you see anyone?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, the house has been empty, though. A couple of days ago, I thought I saw a light flicker in the upstairs window. I figured it was just my imagination." My heart skipped a beat. "A light? Are you sure?" "Well, not entirely. Maybe just a reflection from a car on the street. But, it gave me the creeps." I thanked her and returned to the old man's house. The feeling that I was missing something wouldn't let go. I stepped onto the porch and peeked into the living room window. Dust covered the furniture, but the footprints on the floor looked fresh. Someone had definitely been here. But who? And why? Anxiety gnawed at me, making me feel that maybe the old man hadn't been delirious. Maybe his son really did come back. Or, I tried to calm down, but the tension inside me kept growing. If it was true, why was the son hiding? And why was my wife with him? The house remained silent, but I knew the answer was here. I had to get to the truth. Otherwise, I would lose my mind. Night fell suddenly, as if someone had switched off the light. I sat in the living room, staring into the darkness. My wife was getting ready for bed, and her voice from the bedroom sounded distant. "Aren't you coming to bed?" "Soon," I mumbled, trying to conceal my tension. I was waiting for her to fall asleep. Thoughts were swirling in my head like a storm. After talking to Mrs. Hale in the morning, I couldn't settle down. The light on the second floor of the old man's house. Who was there? Why did the son's room smell fresh? My thoughts were so scattered that I couldn't focus on any one of them, and they eventually dragged me into sleep. When I woke up to the first rays of the sun, I quietly slipped out of the house and headed toward the old house. My heart pounded in my chest, and my palms were sweaty. I crossed the empty street, trying not to make any noise. The house stood dark and grim as always, but inside I had a burning feeling that I was on the verge of uncovering something. Approaching the porch, I froze. The door was slightly open. I distinctly remembered closing it in the morning. A chill crept inside me. I slowly entered, trying not to make the floorboards creak. The house seemed silent. I looked around the living room. Everything was in place. Then I went upstairs to my son's room. The door was ajar, and I heard a rustle. I stopped at the threshold, trying to slow my breathing. "Damn, where did you leave the bag?" a man's voice sounded. "Right here, by the bed," answered a familiar female voice. The world collapsed in an instant. I carefully peeked through the gap. My wife was sitting on the bed, her face illuminated by a dim lamp. Opposite her stood a man, the very same son of the old man who disappeared a couple of years ago. He was alive. And they spoke as if it were just a regular morning. "You always forget everything," she smirked, handing him the bag. "Sorry, my nerves are on edge," he mumbled. "I still can't believe we got away with it." "Everything went smoothly," she smiled. "The old man has been dead for a long time, and my husband suspects nothing." I felt my legs weaken. My heart was about to burst from pain and fury. I clenched my fists so hard that my nails dug into my palms. "You know, he's become so lost," she said, adjusting her hair. "Sometimes I even feel sorry for him." "Forget it," he shrugged. "You should have left him long ago." "I would have, but it would have looked too suspicious," she sighed. "Better to act as if everything's normal. As long as he doesn't find out, we can live peacefully," he added, pulling a stack of money from the bag. I couldn't stand still any longer. Something inside me broke. I wanted to burst in there and demand an explanation. But my legs wouldn't move. I quietly stepped back, left the house, trying not to make a sound. Walking home, I moved as if in a dream. All those months of lies, all those years. She was right there, smiling, cooking dinner, and all this time meeting him. The old man's son who had been hiding here all this time. Her words kept echoing in my head, "As long as he doesn't find out, we can live peacefully." A wave of emptiness washed over me. I sat on the floor, staring at one spot. How could I have missed it? How could I have been so blind? After a while, I heard her footsteps upstairs. She came home as if nothing had happened. I saw her reflection in the mirror, calm, serene. I couldn't believe that this woman I loved had been hiding such a truth from me. All I wanted was to figure it out. To understand why she chose him. Why she kept the truth hidden even when I felt something was wrong. I closed my eyes and felt salty tears on my lips. The world around me was falling apart and I remained alone amidst the ruins of my life. At that moment, I gathered all the remaining willpower and headed to work because staying in my own house with her was unbearable. I returned home late. My head was heavy with thoughts that wouldn't form a clear picture. I tried to make sense of what was happening, but each new realization only made it more confusing. My wife was asleep upstairs and I sat at the kitchen table absent-mindedly flipping through the old man's diary. His words no longer seemed like ramblings. On the contrary, they formed a horrifying puzzle. "I'm worried about my savings. My son knows about the safe. I wanted to tell my friend, but he's too kind. If I die, let him find this note. The money is for old age, but now I'm not sure I'll be able to use it." I froze, rereading the lines again and again. The old man wrote about some safe. I remembered once he mentioned a stash for emergencies, but I hadn't paid attention, just old man's quirks. But now those words took on a different meaning. A conversation with my wife surfaced in my memory. She once said she visited the old man to check if he was okay. I was surprised at the time. It was usually my responsibility. She said the old man looked tired and complained about his health. And then his sudden death. Chills ran down my spine. My thoughts merged into a single terrifying realization. The old man didn't just die. He was helped. And those who helped him were the ones he trusted, my wife and his son. Maybe that's why the son returned? Not for reconciliation, but for the money? But if the old man figured it out, why didn't he do anything? Perhaps he didn't have time. Or couldn't fully believe it. I flipped through the diary to the last page, and my gaze caught on a scrap of paper. I wiped the dust away with my sleeve and read. The safe code is 1957. If something happens to me, check the wardrobe in the bedroom. I trust only you, my friend. The safe. I jumped up and ran to the old house. My heart was pounding in my chest as if reminding me that time was running out. The house greeted me with a deathly silence. I went upstairs to the old man's bedroom. The wardrobe against the wall was tightly pressed to the wallpaper, but I managed to move it slightly. On the wall, I noticed a recess, a small door. That was the safe. I entered the code, 1957, and heard a light click. The door opened, but inside I found only an empty shelf. The money was gone. I felt anger and despair washing over me. They had already taken everything. The plan had been thought out in advance. A memory flashed through my mind. How she recently bought a new phone, although she always complained about not having enough money. And those shopping trips that I thought were just routine. Now I knew where it all came from. I sank to the floor and stared at the empty safe. The old man knew about their plan but didn't manage to stop it. Maybe he suspected that his death wasn't an accident. And I didn't see anything until the truth hit me in the face. When I got home, my wife was already sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Her face was calm as always, but I noticed a spark of anxiety in her eyes. "Where have you been?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Just getting some air," I replied, trying not to give myself away. I walked past her into the bedroom and opened the diary again. Now every page seemed like a cry for help. The old man knew his days were numbered. He couldn't directly accuse his son, but he left me the key to the truth. I realized she knew about the money. She and his son had planned everything in advance. I heard her footsteps and quickly closed the diary. She entered the room and sat down next to me. "Are you okay? You've been distant these past few days." I looked at her, trying to hide my rage. "Just remembering the old man," I lied. "Are you really thinking about him?" She smiled, but a hint of fear flickered in her eyes. I nodded without breaking eye contact. She wanted to say something but remained silent. I could feel it. She was scared that I knew something, but I wasn't ready to reveal my cards yet. I needed to find out everything first. When she left the room, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Now I knew the truth. They took the money. They killed the old man. And I couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. But how to make her confess? How to get the truth from someone who has already taken a life for profit? I looked at the diary and realized the old man hadn't just left me his notes. He left me a choice, to accept the truth or ignore it. And I knew I had to take a step toward the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Couldn't stay home. Grabbing my jacket, I stepped out into the night and wandered along the empty streets. The cold night air did nothing to clear my mind. I tried to gather my thoughts, but every memory cut like a shard of glass. Money. All for money. I had heard of greed destroying families, but I never thought I would face it myself. The old man didn't just die. They killed him, my wife and his son. Details that once seemed trivial surfaced in my mind. Conversations about saving for old age when the old man complained about his health. My wife once saying, "It would be nice to go on a vacation at least once without worrying about expenses." The recently bought new phone, despite her always being frugal. I understood. They had been planning this for a long time. After his son disappeared, the old man didn't break right away. He held on to the hope that his son would come back and believed in the best for a long time. But when the son reappeared, he didn't share the joy of his return with his father. Instead, he brought death. Why didn't the old man fight back? Why didn't he kick them out? The answer was simple. He couldn't believe his own son was capable of such a thing. Yet he still recorded the truth. Not for himself, but for me. I remembered the last time the old man looked at me when I brought him his medication. He was silent for a long time and then suddenly said, "You're a good man. I hope you always stay that way." At the time, I thought it was just an old man's rambling. But now I understood he was warning me. He wanted me not to become like his son. How could I not notice? She visited the old man under the pretext of helping, but in reality, she was checking how he was feeling. She said the old man looked weak, but in reality, she knew. They were slowly poisoning him. And the son was there, not to help but to speed up the process. The old man's words from the diary came back to me. She said she would bring the medicine, but after taking it I felt worse. I don't know whom to trust. Back then I didn't think much of it. I thought he was just confused. But now it all made sense. She was the one bringing the medicine, and the son was behind her, hiding in the shadows. I stopped in the middle of the street, trying to breathe. My chest felt tight, as if invisible hands were dragging me down. Why? Why did she do it? For money? Or was it because of him? I didn't know what was worse, being betrayed for greed or for passion. I returned to the old man's house. The empty yard looked the same as ever. How long had they been pretending? How long had I been blind? I climbed the creaky steps and went inside. The son's room looked just as empty and lifeless. Only the faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air. I sat on the edge of the bed and buried my face in my hands. The old man gave me a chance to learn the truth. But what now? What should I do? Go to the police? But I had no evidence except for the diary. The words of a dying old man. They could say he was just rambling in his old age. I had to make her confess. Drag the truth out. But how? She knew how to lie, how to pretend. A thought flashed through my mind. What if she didn't know that the son poisoned his father? Maybe she just wanted the money and didn't realize his intentions? But no. I remembered how she spoke about the old man's condition as if she knew in advance that he would soon be gone. She understood what they were doing. I stood up and clenched my fists. I needed to hear it from her. I couldn't keep living with guesses and accusations without proof. I needed to see her reaction. My eyes burned from lack of sleep and anger. I knew I was ready to go to the end. When I got home, she was already asleep. I quietly approached the bed and looked at her face. Calm, peaceful, as if nothing weighed on her soul. I gently touched her shoulder, but she didn't wake up. For a moment, it felt like a dream. But the diary in my hands was real, with the marks of the years lived and the bitter truth on its pages. I spent the entire night sitting in the kitchen, staring at the bedroom door. The old man's words echoed in my head. I hope you always remain a good person. But how can you stay good when you've been betrayed by those you loved? The morning light was cold when I heard her steps on the stairs. She entered the kitchen, slightly surprised at the sight of me. Did you not sleep? She asked, pouring herself coffee. No, I replied calmly, gripping the diary in my hands. Did something happen? Her voice was strained, as if sensing the coming storm. Yes, I raised my eyes and looked straight at her. We need to talk. At that moment I knew, no matter how she tried to wriggle out, I would press on to the end. I had to hear the truth from her lips, even if it tore me apart. She froze in place, the coffee cup suspended in her hand. I looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Once her face seemed familiar and warm to me, but now I saw a stranger. What happened? She asked, trying to smile. Sit down, I said firmly, nodding at the chair opposite. She put the cup on the table, sat down, and clasped her fingers. Her calmness looked staged. You look strange, she remarked. I was at the old man's house, I said, not taking my eyes off her. And I found the safe. Her face turned slightly pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. What safe? She squeezed out. The one he wrote about in the diary, I replied coldly. The old man kept it for emergencies. I opened it, but it was empty. She averted her eyes. I saw her fingers trembling slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Her voice was tense. You do know, I said quietly. I know the old man didn't just die. She looked up at me and I saw fear in her eyes. What are you saying? It was a heart attack. You said so yourself. The doctor said that. But he didn't know that the old man complained about strange pains after you brought him his medicine. She turned even paler and abruptly stood up from the table. Are you accusing me of murder? You've lost your mind. I stood up as well, not letting her leave. Why didn't you tell me his son had come back? I asked calmly. She froze as if caught red-handed. What? You said he disappeared. Stop lying. I shouted, unable to hold back my anger any longer. I saw you together at the old man's house. You and him planned it all. You helped the old man die to get the money faster. She took a step back and I noticed her lips trembling. You've lost your mind, she whispered. You made me this way, I replied bitterly. You lied to my face while sleeping with him behind my back. All for money. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to shield herself from my rage. It's not like that. I didn't mean to. Her voice cracked. I felt a wave of disgust rising within me. What exactly didn't you mean? For me to find out? Or for the old man to die so soon? Her shoulders slumped. I could see her desperately trying to come up with an explanation. He said the old man wasn't going to make it anyway. That he would die soon. I wanted it to end. End what? Your charade? Or your miserable life with me? She looked at me with despair. I didn't think he would really die, or that I would find out. Her eyes filled with tears. I loved you, she whispered. Loved? The bitterness in my voice broke free. You loved me until you saw a chance to get more money. She remained silent. I felt the pain inside me growing unbearable. You helped kill him, I said quietly. And for what? To spend the money on vacations? On new things? Or on living with him? She lowered her head, no longer trying to justify herself. I realized she knew exactly what she was doing. For him and for the money, she stepped over both the old man and me. What now? She asked, looking at the floor. Now? I gave a bitter laugh. Now I'm calling the police. She lifted her head, panic flashing in her eyes. No. You can't. This will destroy everything. Destroy? I scoffed. You've already destroyed everything. We lived a lie. You killed a man for money. And you thought I would stay silent? She stepped toward me, trying to grab my hand. Please. Let's leave. We can start over. I love you. Love? I stepped back, not letting her touch me. You only love money. She fell to her knees, sobbing, but I felt no pity or compassion. I took out my phone and dialed the police. I want to report a murder, I said firmly. Her sobs grew louder, but I paid them no mind. Inside, I felt cold and empty. I had made my choice between truth and lies. When I hung up, she clung to my legs, begging for forgiveness. But I felt nothing. My wife had died for me the moment she chose money and another man. I knew that ahead of me lay long investigations and pain. But I couldn't live with the lie any longer. The truth was worth more even if it destroyed everything I once loved.